Not sure how this is going to work with internet from Bahamas. Hopefully it goes okay. Uh, Yay. Welcome. Hi, everybody. So, disclaimer. I am in my little condo, but my air conditioning has not worked all week. So, and I didn't want to talk with the door open because I think people will wonder why I'm talking to myself. so, I may start to like sweat profusely because it's probably about 30 degrees in here. So, bear with me. No fault of the owners that I'm renting from. I didn't actually notify them until yesterday that my air conditioning wasn't working. So I thought I was doing okay with it. I was sleeping fine, but I thought to be fair to anybody else that may come and rent it after I leave, that I should probably notify the owners that their air conditioning was not working or is not working. So the repair guys are coming today. Yay. Yes, Matt, I got a little bit of sun, but I can see that my neck has not gotten any. I'm trying to stay out of the sun. I'm having my allergic reaction to the sun. Tropical weather is not fitting me well anymore, which really sucks. I don't like it. I don't know if anybody else gets that, but I break out in a rash. I don't know if you could see it. It's actually it's a lot better right now, but it gets really, really, really itchy. Last night was pretty bad, but thankfully it went down this morning. Okay, so I haven't seen you guys in so long. I appreciate you all sticking around and bearing with me. Show season was a bit rough in terms of having 3 shows in 3 months, and then a whole bunch of other stuff happening at the same time. So I wanted to talk a little bit about my shows before I actually forgot about them. Should you guys have any show questions, feel free to write them in the message box, and then I will remember to look there and read them and try and answer them. But I think I wrote down a few points this morning so that I wouldn't actually forget what I wanted to say. Because when you're on vacation, so is your brain. So I have to turn myself back into work mode a little bit here. But let's start. I think the one thing that really stood out the most to me is how much light really affects how people perceive your work and how that initial attraction happens. So at the Artist Project in Toronto, sorry, I have something in my eye. The Artist Project in Toronto, I had some light issues. First of all, the company that we have to rent our lights from are crap. And I can't be more blunt about that. They were horrible lights. And I think I had 5 of them, and only 2 of them were actually, I would say, like cool lights. The rest were pretty much on their way out as in dying. They were very weak and they were very warm. And then the other thing that happened is I had a massive light from the big ceiling throughout the exhibition center, or wherever we were Better Living Center. There's really these massive lights that there's just like a few of them throughout the whole area, and there was one right on top of my booth, and sort of on top of my booth, but kind of more in behind my booth, and it's a straight down light, and I think that was causing a downward shadow. And it was really just like if I looked down the aisle, everybody else's booth had more light. Like everybody else's walls looked white where mine looked off-white. And that I think hurt me tremendously in terms of that first reaction when people look down the aisle. They immediately go to the brightest booth, the brightest work. And that this year, my work was a bit more dark and a bit more grungy. So not having the proper light really hurt my ability to stand out. And I did ask the guys to come and fix them, but the lights were just, I didn't want him to have to go back and get 3 more new lights, because he got me 4 new lights and they still were crap. And so it is what it is. Sometimes that happens. It's luck of the draw sometimes, and it shouldn't be that way, especially when you're paying almost, $700, between $600 and $700 for lights. You expect to have a very well lit booth. So should I do the show next year, I'm gonna just have to suck it up and buy a couple of more lights. I do have a smaller booth for next year. However, it's just about trying to determine whether I want to do that show. This is the hard part, that if you guys start doing shows or already in shows, indoor show costs are a lot of money. And then for me now, I don't live in Toronto, so now I have to travel. Not that traveling is a big thing, and I get free accommodations when I'm there, so I'm really fortunate that way. But to me, every time I'm away from home, it's time away from painting, and so I have to kind of balance that out. I definitely made my booth back. I doubled my expenses plus them, so it's not like it was a horrible show. I just feel that my work this year in my booth should have stood out a little bit more than what it did. And so then let's fast forward to, I guess to how I judge a show. I did make a lot of contacts. I met a lot of new people, and I gave out a lot of cards. And so generally that to me is the mark of a good show. So I don't really know why I felt frustrated in terms of what went down at the first show in April. I just felt something was missing from the show, and again, it could have just been the lights. So then I'm gonna flash myself. Whoo, it's hot in here. So then I went to New York, and New York was in terms of attendance for both shows, I would say probably New York had a bit more. I mean, New York is a massive city. We were in Brooklyn, so still part of New York, but it just sounds better to say New York. I would say it was definitely probably more well attended, but it's hard to say because the show was smaller and the aisles were smaller. So it could have been the same amount of people just packed in a smaller building, if that makes any sense. Now, the difference with New York is the way the building was built. They were, it kind of had like an overhang roof. It was a warehouse building, so just really galvanized steel building, very industrial looking. But the way the roof was built, it had an overhang with windows very high up. And I was facing the windows, like the way the sun was coming in and setting, all the light was on my booth. And I do remember saying to the other artists who were saying, oh, you guys got the better side, you're getting all the natural light. And I laughed, I joked with them, and I just said, this is the first time ever in all the shows I've done that the light has actually worked in my favor. So I will not apologize for that. And it made a huge difference, absolutely made a huge difference. And in terms of what it was the same body of work that I brought to Toronto that I brought to New York, and I damn near sold out in New York. That's how much more my work was appreciated there in terms of people being drawn into my booth. So generally, I find that usually when you do a new show, it kind of takes people a few times to get warmed up, to find out who you are. They've never seen you work before. They've never seen you at this show, because sometimes people come to the show more than once, and if they follow you in terms of like the show site that promotes the show, I was kind of like a newbie. I had never shown there before, so to do that well on my first show, I have to chalk it up to the light being in my favor. And I also chalk it up to planning my booth out. I really took a lot more time this year to plan my booth in terms of the layout, how many pieces I was going to hang on the wall at one time. I did the same at Artist Project, and I still think that that was my best booth ever. So to not have the same love in Toronto, which I've been showing for years, opposed to having much more love in Toronto or in New York, the only thing that was different at both those shows was the amount of light in New York was unbelievable. I probably didn't even need to have lights. And I remember buying 2 extra lights in New York because I felt disappointed from the Artist Project in terms of how my booth was lit. And so I wanted to make sure that that situation didn't happen again in New York. And sure enough, it was like I had a massive spotlight on my booth. And I mean, everybody else on our side also had that same spotlight. And you could see the difference when people would walk around the corner. They would be more inclined to gravitate towards what was brighter. So that's a lesson learned. I should have been more vocal in Toronto and stood my ground and politely demanded better lights, considering how much I paid. And I probably should have bit the bullet. If they didn't have brighter lights, I should have purchased more and just sucked up that extra cost, because in the end, I do think it hurt me. So this is the year of light. So the third show I did was in a park, Riverdale, Jimmy Simpson Park. I didn't do the show last year, just in terms because COVID was still kind of happening, and I didn't know how well the show would be attended. I actually didn't do the Artist Project last year either. This is really my first season going back to doing shows. I did do LA last year in September. That was just kind of like a last minute decision. But so what happened in the park was that show is always my best show. Every year I kill it at that show. And I mean, it's crazy. That show has always been so good to me. And then this year, it's just one of those years. The show was really quiet. I have to disclaimer that normally that show is a constant flow of people. There's usually not that much of a lull in terms of people coming through the aisle. And I don't know if it was our specific aisle. Our layout was kind of weird where we were. So we had a lot of dead time, like a lot of dead time, where I was like, I can't manage this. I'm so bored. And for me, a good show isn't, again, it's not really about selling art. It's about making connections, having conversations, and people just being interested in your art in general, taking cards, your contact information, all of that stuff. And I had very few conversations with people, and our aisle was pretty much quiet the whole time. And this was for everybody in our aisle. It wasn't just me. I think there was one guy way at the far end. He had an end booth, and I think he did okay. But it was pretty quiet. I'm trying to think of anybody. I think one person across from me sold a painting. The one next to me sold some small, little tiny paintings. The one on the other side of me didn't sell anything. So it was really kind of a bummer for a lot of people. Because, like I say, generally, all the wind's picking up outside and things are flying around. Generally, that's a really good show for a lot of artists. And so I think what is happening at that show, well, in terms of the people not coming, I think that's just across the board in Canada right now. I think people are being much more mindful about their money and what's happening in the economy. You know, the bank rate keeps rising. For all of you that are in different areas, it may not be the same for you. It certainly wasn't in New York. But I know in Europe there has been definitely a slowdown with gallery sales, and it's really starting to trickle around, and people are starting to feel it. So if this year your sales are a lot lower and you're not doing what you think you should be doing in sales, don't take it personally. I know a couple of you who were at the show reached out and were a bit feeling frustrated as well with the terms in terms of the sales. Don't be. It's just the temperature outside right now. People are being very, very careful, and I don't blame them. I'm doing the same just to be mindful in terms of how much I spend. I say that as I'm sitting in the Bahamas, but I did I did book this trip a while ago. So don't be totally disappointed in terms of that. The other thing that happened at Riverdale for me, in terms of why it was extra slow, I didn't notice it. I really sometimes don't really pay attention to it, but the park has grown. So like, the 2 years that COVID happened, the show didn't happen in the park. And then last year. So basically it's been 3 years since I've done a show in that park, and the trees have gotten a lot larger. And I think the problem with that is it's giving more shade to people. I know one of my friends was completely in the shade, and they were freezing in terms of where they were in the park. And I was in the sun in the morning, but my booth didn't get the sun in the afternoon, but I was still kind of in the sun. I don't know if that makes sense, but so my art wasn't getting the sun, but I was getting the sun. And so I was generally warm where I was, and other people were freezing. But the problem with that, again, is it's taking away all the light, and then you're stuck in a tent. So I think that that hinders, again, people wanting to come into your booth because they're not having that initial reaction to the work. When nothing stands out to them, it's just a blah tent. And so I barely gave out any cards. I barely talked to anybody, and it was like I had never sold a piece in my life. It was very, very bizarre. The only people I actually sold to were people who knew of me and have been following me and have already purchased paintings from me before. So I was really lucky to have 4 really good collectors to come down to the show. And that's the reason I was able to sell. I think I sold 4 paintings, but they were good sized paintings. But for me to go to an art show and not sell one 12 by 12 is like the craziest thing that ever has happened to me before. As I was actually talking to you all here, an order came through for a 12 by 12 because I had mentioned that I was going to list some 12 by 12. So anybody who was at that show, do not feel bad. That is not the norm. It's just the temperature out in the water and what's happening in the world right now. So, what happened with the COVID times, and which was kind of like a weird phenomenon that nobody was traveling, everybody was staying home, everybody had all this extra, not everybody, a lot of people had extra money who were still fortunate enough to keep their employment. All the extra stuff they spent on trips and outdoor activities was removed, and so they found themselves with extra cost. And at that time, they decided to support artists, and a lot of us made some really good money during the COVID years. So it's kind of like, that pendulum swings all the time. I have been hearing from all the galleries that I work with that their galleries are pretty much quiet as can be. They're relating how they feel during this period is the closest thing that they can relate it to is back in 2008 when the financial crash happened in the States, and that did a ripple effect around, a lot of other countries. So it's a different time out there right now, so don't feel bad. My suggestion is just honestly take this time to really work on your art, enjoy making art, um, and not focus so much on the money. I'm doing the same thing. I'm kind of like, um, what was I going to say? I just lost my train of mind. Oh, this is you guys saw that I was cooking a whole bunch of food before I left. Well, this I'm taking the time when I get back to kind of work on myself, get myself healthy, start exercising a lot more than what I have been, because I need to like take off my COVID pounds, and I always say my stress pounds from buying a horse, which is still comical. But so those are the takeaway. Oh, the other takeaway I have from my show is this was probably more evident in New York than it was in my other two shows, just because in terms of the flow of people, I wasn't having the dialogues that I had. But I would just say that the story that you tell about your work is so important to actually being able to sell your work. You have to be able to read people in terms of, do they want the full story or do they want the Coles Notes story, like the shorter version? Some people really like to hear the story of how your work has progressed and how you come up with your composition, and is there any behind the scene meaning to your work. And this is different. This is more non-representational art. And so, the first few days, and I think you guys know, I fell off my horse like a week before New York. And then I decided to be a New Yorker while I was in New York and take the subway and walk 1.5 kilometers to and from my show. And then by Sunday, I could barely walk. It was horrendous. I was in so much pain, it wasn't funny. And so, I found myself Saturday, when it really started to take effect, like the first couple of days I was telling the story, I guess a longer version of the story, a little bit more introspective as to why I actually really create the work. And I found that people were kind of like, some people really like to hear it, but some people were like, it's just too much for me and it makes no sense. And I'm like, okay, not that they said that, but you can kind of read their energy. And throughout the 4 days, a lot of people were saying, oh, it feels like, urban structure. Oh, it really reminds me of an urban city. And instead of just going with that and just embellishing that story, I was like, no, in my mind, I wanted to tell what the art was really about. And then by Saturday afternoon, I just said, you know what, screw it. If people see urban scapes and an urban feel, I'm just going to play that up. And then that's when the work really started to sell. So I kind of chuckled to myself like, oh, it just makes me laugh sometimes. Like, I don't know why, like, if people see what they see and feel what they feel, if you tell them the story that that's not what it is, then they can't relate to the work anymore. So I would say really pay attention to what your buyers are saying first. If this is in terms of selling your work, if you just want to sell your work, then let them tell you what they see and then just embellish on it, I guess. Like, I know that's a bit like trickery or foolery, but sometimes you just got to go with the flow and don't go against the grain. You could always still just say what your art is. You have it on your website or in your artist statement. But I found that to be a very funny thing. And I guess too, I mean, we're in the heart of New York there, and it's all cityscapes and very urbanized. And so I can see that why they were instantly picking up on this urbanized structure in my work. So then to tell them the story of that's me speaking my language wasn't really jiving with them. So I had to pivot, and the pivot did me well. So so really pay attention. Let them tell you what they see, and then just go with it. If it's really far out and they're saying like cups and saucers or fruit or something like that, then I wouldn't really go with that. That would be just a little bit too much for me. But I definitely understand why they see urbanized structures in my work. That's really not what I'm doing, but I don't even know what I'm doing. It's just a feeling. I don't think my work has really changed in terms of removing that urbanized feel to it since I've moved to the farm. So I can't say that it's my environment that's reflecting my work. I really do think it's just me, having fun and playing around and saying something in terms of organized chaos. That's kind of how I sum up my work. But some people they don't want to hear that. So they need to hear something that they can grab onto that's grounded. So those are my takeaways from the show. I'm going to open the floor up to all of you and see if there's any questions that maybe you wanted to know that you might find or need some help in. I did have one question. So while you guys maybe are typing in your questions, and then I'm going to scroll back and see if there were any other ones. I think Catherine had wrote me in terms of colors that I had ordered. I talk a lot about sepia art or sepia color, sepia. I'm going to ask TriArt actually how to pronounce that properly. And then I had ordered, I guess I had done it in a video where I ordered a neutral gray from TriArt. It's a really cool color. I like that color a lot as well. And I do the same thing. She asked if I add that in lieu of sepia, because I had said to you all that I like to add sepia to my colors to warm them up. So gray is kind of, the neutral gray is kind of the same thing is we refer to it as like the number one color, where you would just consistently mix that into all your colors. So, but you could still, if I was adding neutral gray, I could still add a little dab of sepia. So it's not like I would just add one color to any of color and not add the sepia. I know that sounds really confusing. And when I get back, I am going to do a little tutorial on colors. I know I get asked all the time about how I mix my colors. And so I thought that I would take that opportunity to show you all a basic way of how I mix my colors. Because it's become, think of a bartender in a really fast-paced club. The mixology that happens on a spur of the moment. That's kind of how I paint. I know there's some sort of standardized version because drinks are, a little of this, a little of that, whatever. I'm not really into mixing, but colors is kind of the same way. I usually play around with a few colors but I never just use out of the tube. I'd like my colors to be unique to me so that my work, no matter if someone tries to copy it or not, or do something that's similar, the one thing that's going to stand out and be unique would be my color palette. And that's because I mix my own colors. I don't like to, even the colors that, like I don't just buy the primary colors with black and white, but there are, what am I trying to say here? There's a certain amount or a certain range of colors that I like to use, and those all mix in to make a whole bunch of other new colors. So I don't have to buy all the pre-made colors that are out there. I can limit my stock to just having maybe 10 of really consistent large bottle colors, and then I can mix my own in the moment to make the colors that I want to paint with. And someone had said to me, well, that makes it really difficult if you need to go back into your work to remix the color, because I don't mix my little pots and keep them. That's just too much work for me. I really have done this for so long and done it this way for so long that I can look at my piece and kind of generally remember what color I used or how to mix that color so that I can go back into the painting and rework it. And I think that's because I have narrowed it down to using those. Maybe I don't have my paints in front of me, so I don't know what my staple amount of colors are, but there's probably about 10. And because you all know I've switched to TriArt, I'm still using up my Liquitex, and because I'm not going to throw that away. So once my Liquitex is used up, I'll be 100% over onto TriArt. And they just messaged me the other day and asked me if I wanted to put together like a Lori Mirabelli pack of colors that I consistently use on a regular basis. So I am going to be putting that together, and I'll list that on my website so that you can go if that's something that you're interested in. And then that would be really cool for when I do the tutorial on colors. But I really can, it doesn't even have to be my colors, because I can show you how to mix any color. And it's such a good skill to have, to be able to train your eye to see color in terms of what the ingredients are to create that color. I think it'll help you certainly in the future, and certainly about how to create compositions that are captivating just by using certain colors, and then creating your own colors. And I think it sets artists apart from other artists when you use colors that are different and kind of unique to you. So I feel like I'm rambling, but I'm gonna look and see. Everybody is, no questions from anybody? Okay, you haven't seen me in so long. I'm just scrolling right now. I found a question. A really easy question. TriArt is Canadian, but they are selling in the US, and I would say I've never used Nova Paint, but it's kind of like the same idea. Canadianized version of Nova Paint is they started a small private company on their own, and they have made headwaves in terms of their formula and how great their paints are. So Nova wasn't rated. They had just done a rating scale in terms of the paint quality, and I don't know who did it, but someone in the art field. And Golden and Liquitex and TriArt were rated the top 3 brands. And TriArt got #1 in terms of the glossiest paint for acrylic paint. I think it was for acrylic and oil, I think, but probably more acrylic because acrylic is shiny. So they have done very, very well, and they are making fast moves in the art world. So I'm really, really proud of them, and I love that they are a Canadian company. But yeah, they're trying to branch into the States. So yay for them, because that's not usually how it goes. It's usually American brands come in here, and then us Canadians eat them up. But okay, looking to see. Okay, so Matt has 2 questions. Okay, I'm looking, Matt, right now, trying to find them. I don't know why I didn't see them. Yes, I see that. Matt, I'm not seeing any questions. The only one I see is you wrote, I mean personal Facebook, not my page. The page has been a wash for me, so I don't know what the question to that is. I'm not sure what happened there. So I'll just give Matt a minute to type that in. So I don't know if you guys have noticed, so many new changes on Instagram are happening. I don't know if I said this in in a live or not, but I find that whenever major changes are happening on Instagram, it kind of does a ripple effect in terms of insights and views and reach. And then once that kind of settles in, it kind of starts to go back up again. So I've kind of really stopped worrying about how many people are seeing my work or how far my art reach is getting. I really just have taken a step back and just let things happen. It is what it is, and there's no fighting against the algorithm. It's just go with the flow and just be happy with what you get. Well, nobody even has a question about the Bahamas? You guys are so quiet today. I hope it's coming through all right in terms of internet. This is my first time I've gone live. Trying to think of something else. Oh, there we go. Yes, I just saw your purchase come through. Thank you for that. One question. Ocho? I don't know if that's your name, but your title is Ocho Libre. You asked how many sales? How many sales where and what? Can you be more specific? I don't know if I'm going to paint more aqua. It really is. Sometimes it's honestly, to be fair and truthful, sometimes it's just whatever colors are in front of me. If I don't have to reach too far to grab a paint while I'm in the moment, I just grab what's in front of me. So I am a little bit more loose in terms of how I choose my colors now. Jackie, I'd like to try and paint on raw canvas. I bought a huge roll forever ago and found it when we moved to Oregon. Any suggestions on prepping or mounting to board? I've never mounted raw canvas on board. I don't use board very often, but I suspect you just can use a gel medium or gesso to mount it onto board. And I guess for raw canvas, you really have to figure out how it feels for you, how it works for you, because raw canvas will soak up. Like the thing with raw canvas is you can water down your paints and use them like watercolors and just let the water do the work. You can't do that when it's in primed canvas because the binder in the acrylic paints aren't going to last. It's not made, you're changing the chemical formula. So it's not penetrating through the primer either. So when you're using raw canvas, it's like staining the canvas. You can absolutely water down your paints a ton. And if you don't water down your paints a ton, then you're going to use an enormous amount of paint and it's going to cost you a fortune. The other thing you could do is you could use clear gesso. TriArt makes clear gesso, and you can stretch your canvas and then coat it with clear gesso so that it becomes a non-absorbent ground so that it will act like primed canvas. But the difference is you're going to have the look and the feel of raw canvas. Which might be interesting. So you're going to have to play around and see what feels better for you and the technique and the marks that you want to make, which way would feel better for you. So I would say try both, clear gesso and then non-gesso and just using plain raw. And buy a little board and definitely I'm sure that if you if you're using raw canvas and I guess you want to also put it on board, then if you use primed canvas, or if you use a primer, then it's not gonna be raw canvas anymore. So I guess the only way to do that is with clear gesso. Now that I've talked that out in my head, because most times if it's raw canvas, I don't think they put it on board or mounting it on board. Usually it's just stretched. I'm always curious why everybody wants to mount on board. I've never done it, but I guess it's the hard surface that it just makes it easier to do marks on. But that's just me. I'm just curious about that. Okay, so is it a good idea to link Instagram to personal Facebook instead of Facebook page? Page has no traffic at all. This is a really good question, Matt, that I haven't found out the answer to, but I'm in the same boat in terms of I don't want to link to my Instagram to my personal page. I really like keeping that separate, and so I find it interesting that Instagram, when you go to link them, it goes to your personal page and not your page account. So if you notice on my Instagram, I didn't actually link them both. What I did was add, I didn't connect them, I should say. I just added the link to my Facebook page. So I am gonna hopefully be finding out that answer maybe in the next month or so, to try and figure out if there's a way to do that now. Because I don't know, I don't want, because I get friended all the time by people I don't know on Facebook, and I actually never add people to my Facebook. I try and keep that personal, even though it's open and public, but I don't really post anything that's personal. But I'm always worried about scammers, so I really don't accept any friend requests for that reason. So it's a good question, and hopefully I will find the answer out to it. So I guess you would have to ask yourself, are you okay with people friending your personal Facebook page and adding them? Because I don't like to have that. Sorry, I'm just reading. I get so serious when I'm reading. So Yvette says she's taken a break from painting for the last 2 months. She feels a bit burnt out and feels like my creativity just needs to incubate for a while. Do I take breaks like that? I can't, my breaks can't be that long, unfortunately, because this is my only income. I am a sole supporter. It's just me. And so I have to work whether I feel like working or not working. But generally, like right now, I've been here for almost a week, and I'm at the point where I'm kind of regretting my decision in not taking some art with me, because it's really become a part of who I am. So I do like to paint generally often. The problem, I think, when I take breaks, they're like a week break here and a week break there, and that's usually because I also get to the point where I feel like I'm a bit burnt out, and I call it my creativity tank is empty. Even when you work a 9-to-5 job and you're employed by somebody else, you still take vacation throughout the year. But when you're self-employed, you have a tendency to try and work as much as you possibly can, and you don't really you don't pre-plan out your breaks, I guess. Like a weekend, I could still work on a weekend, and I could still work during the week. So sometimes I'm not really aware of how much I'm working, and then I can only figure that out by the fact that nothing is coming out when I'm painting, and then that means I need a break. But if the painting is really good, I will go every day, 7 days a week until it runs out, because that's just the way my process happens. That some weeks are really good weeks and some weeks are really crap weeks. So when it's flowing, I'll work. So if you can afford to take breaks from painting because you maybe still have a day job or you're not a sole supporter, then by all means do it. I think that will help with the creativity coming back. And you never want to do anything until you get to the point where you feel burnt out, because you don't want this to be something that you despise doing in the end. You make art because you love making art. So that's my suggestion. Go ahead, take the break if you can. Will the canvas shrink if you don't stretch it? Yes, it does shrink. I don't. It's cotton. It's pure cotton, so it definitely does shrink, and so that's why I know. For me, I mean, lots of people paint on canvas that isn't stretched. I don't. I used to do it. I don't do it anymore. I like to have it. The whole reason it's stretched, you stretch it first, then you paint on it. And I just think it's safer too, because the acrylic binders also get stretched. If you don't pre-stretch your canvas, then when you go to stretch it, all of that acrylic binder gets stretched. And sometimes if you overstretch it and you're not using a good quality paint, that paint will crack and split. So I always stretch my canvases now. Matt, your questions are lost in cyberspace, never ending. I did figure out mark making though, which is good. Congratulations on figuring out mark making. Mark making is very fun. Question is, what's your opinion on paying those art influencers on Instagram to have your work featured on their page? Everything seems to be pay for play these days. Yes, absolutely. I don't really know about the art influencers to pay. I don't know if that does any good. And you kind of just mean like those large art accounts. I did one maybe 3 years ago, and I don't know if it had any effect or not, so I don't think it's the greatest idea. I think a lot of the followers on their account are fake anyway, so I would be really careful on who you would pay to play. And sometimes they're sneaky too. A couple of people have messaged me and asked, because the accounts will grab an artist's account and they'll shoot out their posts for free, and then it looks like that artist has paid to have their art sent out in a story. So I had a couple of people send a question to me asking, if I'm having any success having this account send my stories out, and I'm like, I never paid to have my stuff sent out. So they're very sneaky. So I would be very leery about that. Instagram recently quit allowing Instagram to show your business page on Facebook. Yeah, there's something happening there. I don't know. I noticed that something has changed, Connie, in terms of Facebook and Instagram, the business page. Even with the creator, the Meta verification, you can't do it with your business page. You can only do it with your personal page or your creator account. I don't know what the reason for that is. I definitely have I haven't taken a step back in terms of creating my art, but I have taken a step back in terms of social media. So I kind of feel like I've been a little bit out of the loop lately. But I did notice that there has been a change, and I just don't know the reason why for it yet. I probably should look up. I have one more week here, so in the evenings when I'm on my own, I might have to do a little bit of reading to kind of figure this out, or early morning coffee, seeing how I don't have any paints here to paint. Ocho, you are a character. What do you do when you start having stacks of unsold paintings? Give them away. I only have so much wall space. I always have a stack of unsold paintings, Matt. So that's called your body of work. Those can become very, very important at some point in your life, should your career take off. So I always feel the larger my body of work is, the better I feel secure. So I don't like having only a few paintings around me that are completed. If you were still in the game of still learning and developing your style, then I like, as I was back then, I would repaint them and I would keep practicing. So that's what I do. Or that's what I did. And what I do now is I don't paint over them, I save them. And they become part of my body of work. I thankfully have a large storage space where I can store them. And how's the horse injury? It's been amazing. Thank you for asking. I can now walk normal again. And I went to an osteopath twice. He was absolutely amazing and fixed what wasn't working, I guess. So I guess what was happening, it was my sciatic nerve. And so I guess there was some inflammation of me landing on my buttocks, and it was putting pressure on my sciatic nerve. So that was pretty painful, but it is gone now. So really excited about that. Doing lots of pool exercises as well to kind of strengthen that in a way that's good for my joints. So hopefully once I get back, I will be able to get back on my horse. So we'll see how that goes. Okay, what would you say is more effective, is to have big paintings or small paintings on an art show, with frames or not? What would be the right amount of paintings in an art show? I'm thinking big or small paintings in an art show. I would say if you are an established artist, no, I would say, hold on. It has to be what you normally paint. You can't I guess you can't gear your size going into an art show. So if you only paint large, then bring large. If you only paint small, bring small. If you can do large, small, medium, extra large, then that's what you're going to bring. You're going to bring a mix of all sizes. So you have to remember there are much more people around that come to an art show that have a wallet size for a small painting than there are people that have a wallet size for a super large painting. So, but you can't gear your size of painting to harness sales. You have to paint what you love painting, and then because you love it so much, hopefully the sales will come. So that's my answer to that one. Frame or not, again, that depends on what kind of painting you're painting. There are paintings that absolutely require frames, and your substrate, depending on what you're painting on. If you're painting on paper, then yes, you should be framing your work. If you're painting on, sometimes abstract work doesn't need a frame, but sometimes it does. So that's a personal preference, whether you want to frame your work or not. It's when you start framing, that's a huge extra cost that you have to put out that you may not recoup for a while. In terms of getting all your pieces framed. So you have to be mindful with that as well. So I would say wait till your shows start getting really good sales before you start working on getting them framed. And the right amount of paintings for an art show, again, that depends on whether you're painting large, whether you're painting small, what size your booth is. That's really hard for me to answer because the amount of paintings that you would take to a show that you had a 5x20 booth in would be much different than the size of a booth of a 10x10. So you could look back on my page. I showed my booth, how I laid them out. It's always better to have breathing room with your art so that it's not like you don't have your art butted up against each other. The painting should have room around it so that people can see it individually. So you don't want to overhang your booth. But I can't give you a number because that needs to be, that number is really specific to the size you paint and to the size of your booth. So probably not the best answer for you, but I am seeing the time, and I was invited out to brunch this morning, so I am going to have to not cut it short because it is 11 o'clock. But I just want to say thank you so much for joining, and I'm glad the answers helped you. Perfect. That always makes me feel better. And I will probably see you guys when I return. So, yay, I can't wait. So I'm... be safe, be happy, and I will see you guys in maybe a week and a half. All right, ciao. How do I do this now? I always forget, but I think I figured it out. Bye, Connie. See you soon. Hi, everyone.